Hi folks, I'm Ian with Two Guys in a Ride, and today we are out here in Prior Lake and we're at the Muscle Car Bash, and we're here with Steve.
Correct.
And Steve has this stunning, beautiful 64.5 Mustang.
Correct.
So, you are quite the connoisseur of the early Mustangs, and maybe later ones as well, but the 64.5 had some really unique features.
Yes.
So, can you run us through some of them?
Well, yeah, this is a 64.5 convertible. It's actually an A code. The actual high performance 64.5 would have been a K code.
Okay.
So other than everything else on this car, the actual 289 with the 4-barrel, everything else is actually would be a K car, except it doesn't have solid lifters.
Okay.
So if it had solid lifters, it would actually be a K coded car. So
that was the only difference then.
That
okay.
that was that was the one that's the difference on this car. And again, when they were building these cars on their actually VIN numbers, they actually did a really great job of showing where the car was built, where the trim came from, where it was shipped to be sold. So they really had a very sophisticated system in place to be able to track these cars. Now, if you go back and look at it, so I can take a information book and actually look at all this information on differences. So just little nuances on this car. This little Mustang on the side.
Okay.
That's like a ½ inch shorter. So they actually
than the 65.
They actually put a ½ inch. I mean, and again, it's a small little detail, but they actually.
But those are the great details to know. I mean, that's just okay. There are some on the engine.
Right. So some of the things we're looking on the engine, the generator was actually the original generators. When they went in June of 65, they actually stopped the production of the 64.5s and actually have 65. So technically, the car has to be on a production date, be a 64.5.
Okay.
That I don't have that actually date in my mind, but it's right around the 1st of August in 65.
Okay.
Because this car was introduced in April. It was the first time that a major car manufacturer introduced a car in the spring. They had never done that before. So that was one of the reasons why that's the reason why it's considered a 64.5. Is because it was actually introduced early in that year. So in effect, they would have normally introduced this thing in the fall of 65. So it was actually 6 months ahead of production because they wanted to get a jump on everybody else on this new concept.
But yet all the manuals that came afterwards, like the one you have that talk about how to read the codes and the paint colors, were all from 65 on.
Correct.
So there wasn't any...
They never... This is titled as a 65 Mustang Convertible. But as a purist of Mustangs, this is a 64.5.
Now, inside here, there are some differences with the horns, too.
Right. They had the horns actually down on the frame, the two horns, and because they actually had water problems, they moved the horns up actually on the cowling on the front here to get it away from the water. So that's again, that's one of the changes that was really required because it actually was functional. There was some things that were actually functional that they made changes on.
Speaking of which, let's walk to the back.
Okay.
And show me another one because there's one on the gas tank.
Correct. When they originally introduced these cars, they actually had the gas cap. They had the gas cap that when you took it off, this actually did not have this ring on it. And so in effect...
And is it a wire ring?
Yeah, it's a wire ring, kind of metal ring that goes back on. So in effect, the reason that they put it on there, obviously, is that people were losing their gas caps. And they must have figured that out early on because this is the June production car. The one we just looked at was a May production. And when I took it off...
1 month, yeah, it didn't have the ring at all.
It
wasn't like it was lost.
That's why I took it out, because I was curious to see.
Yeah.
Because that was another actually factor that when it was a 64.5. But again, because of this being on here, those are things that because they were making changes.
They
were making changes as they were doing it.
Now this was also the first mass-produced car that you could customize.
Yeah, accessorize.
Accessorize.
So in effect, Lee Iacocca, when they came up with this car design, they had just a plain Jane car that you could buy for about $1,750 or $1,800. And then what they had is they had rally wheels, they had pony interior, they had accessorization that they could bring this car up to about $2,500. But think about that, 1964 and a half. If the car manufacturer could sit down and take a $1,700 car and all of a sudden produce, a $2,500 car by accessoring, that's really was the big thing. So this was really the original car that allowed people to accessorize their vehicles.
And Lee Iacocca was
one of the brainchild behind this car.
And the design itself was something unique too.
Well, because if you look at it, it was that long front end and that short rear end. Mm-hmm. It was dramatic. If you looked at any car coming out of that era, this was dramatically different. And it was actually considered. The idea was a little sports car, but you could still have people in the back, so it was sporty enough.
But you could
the price was reasonable enough to buy it. You could buy the little 6-cylinder plain Jane, or you could buy a 289, high performance with a 4-barrel, solid lifter K car that actually had, some pretty good horsepower.
So yours is a 289,
right?
And so roughly how much horsepower would this have been producing when it was new?
If stock out of this, probably about 225 horse.
Okay.
And you could push it up in if you had the solid lifters on it. Okay. I don't remember what it actually was at that point, but yeah, I mean for this size car and the weight, this car actually really was significantly fast.
Man, now when you got this car, Steve, was it in this condition?
No, but it actually only had about 75,000 miles on it. But the thing about these cars when they were produced, there's no frame on here. This is the unibody frame, and so they were really, over the years, these were mass produced at about 1 million in the first year and a half. A million Mustangs were built, but most of them ended up in the junkyards because they had no frame on them.
Okay.
And you would come up and you'd actually have, if you went in the trunk, you'd actually have your leaf springs would be up against the trunk deck.
Really?
Because this was all rotted out down here. This is all the unibody that's there. So there was really all of the moisture and stuff would rot that out.
Sure.
They come up there. I mean, I've opened them up, where the springs are up against the trunk hood. They were, they're that bad. So when I got this car, it was actually in pretty good shape. But 15 years ago, I've had this car for 40 years. I got it for my 30th birthday from my wife as a gift. And we're still together, by the way.
That's a good present.
Yeah, we're still together too. So.
Did I mention I'm turning 40 next year? Okay, so I put that in.
Yeah, okay. So what happened was I had this car for 25 years that my kids had helped push around. I had Mustang Fastbacks, I had Coupes. I kind of collected these on and off and bought and sold them. But this is one that I kept because I always planned to actually completely go through restoration. And 15 years ago, I found a guy that actually literally did all the restoration work on this car for me. Frank, he was up in Rice, Minnesota,
okay.
and I wanted a guy that I knew when they went through it could do it. He did all of the motor, the transmission, the rear end, all the body work, all the painting. He did one guy did all the work on this car, and he had just a unique shop. And it took me about 2 years to get it in there with him.
Okay.
And in the end, I think I spent about $22,000.
That's pretty cheap in today's terms.
Yeah,
it's a lot of money, but I mean, if you want to do that now, holy buckets, you could spend that just on the interior.
Right.
Let's talk about the color, because this is a stunning color. Tell us, what color is it, first of all?
Well, when originally got this car, I actually, because I got Mustang Monthly and I got a lot of their different publications how to restore it. I originally had the idea I wanted to restore this myself, and I think I came to the realization that it was way more work than what I was going to have the time to do. So I found somebody that was really good at it, which was Frank that did it.
Right.
So when we actually finally got working on this car, my book indicated that this was an actual Brittany Blue. There's a code book I have that actually shows when the car was manufactured, where it was distributed to, the interior trim, the motor size, all the components of this car are actually in a book, and you could track it. And when I originally got it, there was color samples in this book, and and again it was faded. It looked like it was Brittany Blue.
Okay.
So when we actually got down to actually picking the paint out, and we took the samples in, took them to the actual Ford group, they came back and actually told us, no, this is Guardsman Blue. And I really didn't realize the element of the importance of that Guardsman color until a number of years later when coincidentally I was at the winter dance party in Iowa,
Okay.
and Ricky Nelson's sons were performing there, and we were fortunate enough to be staying at the same hotel, and in the morning we were having breakfast, and we were kind of just chatting with them, and I brought up the fact, I don't even know how it came up, that I had a 64.5 Mustang, and I said I had a Guardsman Blue Mustang, and they said, well, you've got a Cobra Blue Mustang, and I had no idea, what they were talking about, and they said that Carroll Shelby liked the color of the 64.5 Mustang Guardsman, that he asked Ford if he could use that for his Cobra Blue color, and so this car is the only time that they actually use this Guardsman Blue color, and this is now actually the Cobra Blue.
So cars made afterwards didn't even have the option to have this painted.
Well, no, because Ford,
Color.
because
it went to
they
Cobra.
dropped, they dropped this color. You can't even find one. You can't even find one in 65. This is a very unique color.
It makes it even more unique. Yeah,
Right,
to have
right.
that.
So
Amazing.
So that was kind of like an eye opener that you realize, because it took us a bunch of time, and I thank goodness I actually sat down and was particular enough that I actually found the right color, and I didn't paint it Brittany
Right.
blue, which was the easiest, would have been the
easiest
easiest thing to do.
So on the inside here, there are some, again, telltale signs of a 64.5.
Right.
You point those out?
The if you look, and again, little things. This little A on the air vent,
Okay.
they took the A off this air vent when they did the 65.
All right.
They actually, if you look at this here, they actually in 65 they added they have a 5 on the radio, where this one's got a 6. So they actually changed the radios.
The rated numbers?
The rated numbers. So you got a lower station number that was on there.
Was there something about the strike plates on the door?
Yeah,
that
the
was
strike
different?
plates on the door. They've actually strike plates. They made changes. As a matter of fact, I don't even know where that list went that I had. I met a gentleman. If you've ever been to the Henderson Roll-In, which is just a great event, you can learn a lot of things from people if you're down there. If you just turn your hearing aids up and just listen. And he gave me an actual sheet of information that.
Is this the one that listed all the unique
It had all the unique-
characteristics?
Well, they've got like the seatbelt mounts are large eye bolts mounted to the floor, and the 2 chrome pieces of flat metal hold the belt assembly to the bolt. So this is actually, remember, there was no seatbelts, but there's actually mounting spots down here where you can put them. When we recarpeted, they actually had the bolt patterns. But this is where seatbelts. This is another thing. This is where seatbelts. Just before, I think it was 65,
67.
or 67 was mandated, and they were starting to put in.
Already.
Right. So this predated the seatbelt requirements.
Era, but they were getting ready for them.
Correct.
That is interesting.
Correct. The no, to be honest, I think this stuff would actually be kind of interesting just to list.
Oh, absolutely. We will. We'll get a picture of it. That is awesome.
Because I'm still.
Floorboards painted body color, and Ford used more body scaler in the 64.5.
I mean, this is a lot of really almost nitpicky. See, they use clips on the 64.5 and set screws on the 65.
Yeah, just,
so, I mean, just
all those.
all little.
We'll put that back in the truck for now, and we'll get a picture of it.
Right. So it's been a really fun car to own, and what's really interesting, I grew up a Chevy guy,
Okay.
and somehow or another I fell in love with these Mustangs. And I'm not a Ford guy, but I'm a Mustang guy, But maybe I'm a car guy. I mean that.
Well, I would say you are. That leads me up to my next question. What got you into cars in the first place?
I think growing up in the 50s, and when you looked at what was happening in the 50s and watching, I think the evolution of the car transformation in like 55 and 56, where all of a sudden the old kind of fuddy-duddy cars that were being built up until 53 or 54, all of a sudden you saw the Galaxies, you saw the Impalas, you saw, and the colors, the multicolors and stuff. I think it was just, I think you saw them and you couldn't wait for the next car to show up. I can remember watching Bonanza as a kid, and on Sunday nights, when the show would arrive, they would actually, Chevrolet sponsored Bonanza, and I can remember where they would actually, Haas and Little Joe and Ben would ride up, and the new Chevys would be covered up, and they'd actually ride up and said, next week we're going to take the cover off. I mean, I can vividly remember, and and it was a great marketing, and so you just couldn't wait. I actually grew up. There was an Etzel dealership.
Oh, really?
Yes, there was an Etzel dealership that was just about maybe about 10 blocks from where I lived.
Okay.
So I remember when they opened that and went down and saw those new Etzels, and so I mean, I think if you're from the 50s, you sort of naturally became a car person. And then I'm from St. Cloud, Minnesota, and St. Cloud is a real car town.
Yes.
You've
got the Pantowners.
Right, you got Pantown.
That was actually built.
Right, the pan car, right?
Yep.
Yeah, from Pandolfo. Yeah, and so I grew up in a town that was very, very car orientated. Every Friday night, you dragged Saint Germain Street, up and down, and it was a fun time. It was a great era actually. It's nice to see this type of thing coming back.
Yeah, it's a good turnout today too.
Correct.
Now, what is one of your favorite memories with this car?
I think the most favorite memory is getting it, without a doubt, because I had no idea. I had always, we were married. We didn't have a lot of money. You didn't have the ability to go buy things like that. You needed to just get by and put food on the table and support yourself. When they had a surprise birthday party for me, my 30th birthday party, and it was in Rochester, Minnesota. It was at the Holiday Inn, and we were in a ballroom, and I had friends from St. Cloud. I had Rochester friends. I had a lot of friends that were there, and they basically blindfolded me, and they walked me out of the ballroom and into the actual parking lot, in the back that was adjacent to it, and they walked back there, and they uncovered it, and there was this car sitting there. Now the car looked pretty rough, but I was so excited because I had always told my wife that I'd wanted to buy this car from the individual that I saw it from, but I knew I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. And my wife,
you had actually seen that exact car.
Oh yes.
And she went back and bought it.
She went back. She knew I wanted it that bad. So that's probably the most exciting part. Probably the next most exciting is when Frank got it done. When he called me up and said, Steve, I'm finished. I did see some of the progress if I would stop there.
Right.
But it was done and I pulled in. I was just I stood back and I went, oh, wow, this is better than what I could have ever imagined.
Steve, thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with us on the 64.5 Mustang. This is an absolutely stunning car. We sure appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching.